Hello everyone and welcome to another tutorial. This time I am going to be showing you how to use the Ansible automation platform to do kind of interface reconciliation or compliance checking for, say, Cisco devices. This could be routers or switches. In this case, the use case was switches, right? So we have tens of thousands of switch ports out in this enterprise. It could be individualized switches. It could be switch stacks. Like, it doesn't matter. It's going to be this mix and match. And for each interface type, we're going to have a template associated with it. And we're making sure that it kind of meets compliance. So step one is going to be go through and do reporting. Obviously, we don't want to do mitigation right off the bat because there's probably going to be some snowflakes out there. There's going to be some special configurations, as well as there's going to be some stuff that's misconfigured. So how we do this is we scan through, find all of the interface descriptions, and we go based on that. So first I'm going to show you just it moving, and then we'll go back through and talk about all the pieces and parts to make it actually happen. So step one, I've got my Ansible automation platform pulled up, AAP controller here, and I've got my job template already created, and I'm just going to launch it. It's going to go through and do all of my processing, super great, and through the magic of editing, I'm going to cut this little bit out. So here is the report that got produced. So for me in my lab environment, I'm running it against just one Cisco CSR 1000V, right? So I have this virtual router in my environment. Obviously I want to be doing this against switches, but I didn't feel like configuring any switches just for this demo really quick. I probably will in the future actually, but suffice it to say, here's the configuration. I've got 3 interfaces configured on this. I've got one where there is a configuration mismatch, right? So the interface description did match, it pulled the template, it checked the device from the template, and that's what it's doing. So first, it's going to go through and it's going to figure out, hey, does this interface description actually match one that's known to me, right? Like one of mine that I have set up that I've got a template for. If it doesn't, you'll see right here on gig 3, interface description mismatch, and then it includes the configuration, right? So that I can quickly see if I want to do a remediation or not. But also, if it does match a description, all right, well, it's going to go to my Jinja 2 template, it's going to pull that, and it's going to do a comparison between what's actually on the interface and what the template says the interface should look like. If there is a mismatch, they don't match up, I will get the config mismatch message right here, and then it'll dump the configuration so I can take a look at it and figure out is maybe the interface name wrong, the description wrong rather, or is the configuration actually wrong? So I can figure out what's going on there. You can see there is no gig ether 1 because that one actually did match its template, right? Not only did it have a template associated with it, but it matched, so it doesn't show up in the report. So how is this important? I can have it build a gigantic list of everything that's non-compliant, which is great, right? If I'm coming into a brownfield environment, I don't want the automation to just blanket put templates in place because, you know, I can't always trust that when somebody did configure the interface description, you know, whether it's say AP or printer or admin user or whatever the template names happen to be, I can't guarantee that they haven't done something non-standard in there that needs to be that way, right? And so if I just let the automation come in and make that adjustment, that could be bad for everybody. So in this scenario, it gives me opportunity to take a look. Like, is this configuration correct? And if it is and I need to leave it, well, that gives me the opportunity to change the interface description so that it says something like SF or it says snowflake and then whatever, right? Whatever designator we have in there, that this is a specialized port. Also, we can take a look. Anything that didn't have a correct interface description matching, I can look at it and say, oh, well, this is actually admin user. We just didn't name it correctly for whatever reason. So I can set that one, or I can designate that one to go ahead and, you know, be part of the compliance. And so while it does create this nice HTML report, it also creates a CSV file and includes it, right? So I could, in theory, just make modifications to this CSV and then feed that back in to actually do the remediation for me. So not only am I getting a nice big report, but it gives me also kind of a convenient method to make modifications back in. And that's all done in Ansible, right? So this CSV, I'm actually reading that in as variables. It's super easy. There's a community general collection module that allows you to read CSVs in. So super convenient way of doing that. Now, if you are only wanting to see the demo portion is complete, but I'm going to go into the playbook itself and break it down just a little bit more. So inside of the playbook, I have a couple of key things. One, I have my templates and I have my playbooks. These that say main role, these are the ones that really are going to be corresponding to what I'm doing here. This main and check port, those are just debugging stuff out the screen. It's not actually building a report or anything like that. And the role it's actually pulling, it doesn't live in roles right here. I've got a requirements.yml file, and what that does is it instructs the Ansible automation platform, hey, whenever you're synchronizing this project, go ahead and reach out and pull from my Git repository, my public Git repo, the Ansible-report role. So I've got a reporting blog post that shows you kind of how I walk through and do this method where I write lines to a CSV, read that CSV in, and then use a Jinja 2 template that you saw created that nice HTML table, as well as attaches a CSV to an email. And I just transferred that into a role so that I could import it into my projects, and now I can easily use reporting stuff in there. So that's what that is in the roles folder. I also have a template section here, and these templates really are my interface templates. So first I'm going to take a look at this playbook. This is the main playbook where it's going to enter, and you see right here I've got this var section. I've got the interface descriptions. So these are going to be the standard descriptions that you should see on all these interfaces, because in this premise, right, an admin user is going to be an admin user. The port configuration is going to be the same across the entire enterprise. No matter what site it's at, it's going to be the same, save for the VLAN number, right? The VLAN number could be different, and we would just do a site mapping kind of in a variables file. Whether that's group variables, it's directly in the inventory, it's something that's included in the repository here. You could just have a variables site matching system. It could be stored in your CMDB as well, right? Like wherever you're going to pull it from, so long as that information is available, you can do the matching for the VLAN replacement. But these interface descriptions, each one of these should actually have a template file inside of the templates folder. I'm lazy and I'm just doing a quick demo, so I didn't create all the templates. You see I only created 2, but I'll pop into, say, printer right here, and I'll give you a quick overview. You can see here, this is kind of a router interface and not a switch interface. Otherwise, there would be the VLAN with the variable replacement. But you see right here inside the double curly braces or double mustaches, this is the variable name that I'm going to be doing the replacement with. And so it's going to be the interface name. So as I go through the interfaces, it'll replace it there, and it will do the comparison. So having said that, I will jump back over to the main playbook itself. I'm going to go to port main role. So again, comes in with the interface descriptions, the very first thing I do. Next, I set up the headers, and this is going to be for the role. And the headers are basically the headers for the CSV file, right? Like what is going to show up at the top for all of the, what are those, columns? Yeah, column names is really what that is. Next, I come in and I am using the Cisco iOS collection. So it's namespace collection. So it's cisco.ios and iOS facts. So whenever you are using a networking device, you want to turn gather facts false. You want to rather turn gather facts to false up at the top, because most devices in the networking world, if you have gather facts on, which is invisibly on by default, it will break your playbook. So gather facts false right up there at the top. And instead, I will use the iOS specific module right here to go and gather information from it. And what does that do? It grabs a whole bunch of information from that device and brings it in variabilized, ready for me to utilize. In this instance, I want to get all the interfaces associated with this device. Now, imagine it's one switch, no big deal, right? Like I could theoretically just connect in and to that host, and I know, you know, this is going to be a 48 port device, so I can just go through 48 ports and be done. But what happens if it's a switch stack, for example? So in that, in my inventory, I'm going to have one host entry, that represents the switch stack. When I connect in, there could be, one switch in the stack, or there could be like 7, right? There could be a large number. And so how do I keep track of all of that? I don't have to, right? All I have to do is pull the iOS facts, and it will actually list all the interfaces for all the devices in the stack. So I will know, generally in the stack, it'll be like 0/24 for, the first switch is 24th port, and then it'll be 1/24 for the second switch is 24th port, whatever, right? And so all those interface names are going to get kind of pre-populated in these variables for me. Next, what I'm going to do is I am going to create a new variable called port list based on all of those interfaces I pulled in. So when they pull in, by default, they are a dictionary. And if I want to loop in Ansible, it actually has to be a list. So all I'm doing is I'm just taking that dictionary variable and I am turning it into a list with the dict2items plugin. Next, now that I have that port list actually as a list, I will do the specialized task here. What this does is it will loop. You can see down here I'm looping over the port list, and so remember, for each host it's going to perform this operation. So it'll connect to we'll say it's switch stack 1. I'm going to connect into switch stack 1 here, and I'm going to loop over all of the ports that happen to exist in that host. So I'm just going to keep going through performing this task for switch stack 1 for all those ports. And in my task right here is actually calling a task file. So I'm including that task file, not importing, but I'm including because I'm using dynamic variables inside. So what that will do is it will look for this file, and it will just perform, all the tasks in this file for each port, one right after another sequentially. And then last, once it's done doing all of that, right, it completes that for all of the hosts. It will, in that task, it's actually going to build my compliance report file. And then once it's done with all of that, it's just going to send the email via the Ansible role that I imported. So let me take a look at that task file itself, right? That's kind of the meat and potatoes. That's where the work's getting done over here. So remember, for switch stack 1, I pop in with the very first port on the very first switch, and it's going to work its way through this task file, complete, go back, and then use the second port on that switch stack, and then the third port, right? It's going to move one through the other. So the very first thing I'm going to do for the first port in the first host is I'm going to issue a Cisco iOS command, and that's just going to be show run interface and whatever the interface value is that we're operating over right now. And then I'm going to say begin at interface. So whenever you do a show run interface at the top, it actually puts some extra information like configuration. I think that the time at which you put all that, I don't want any of that. I don't care about that. So I'm just saying begin at the word interface, which is just going to really give me kind of mostly my interface block. It actually puts the word end at the very end. And so you can see in this next task right here, I'm setting variable, and I am just resetting that same variable, right? It's the exact same variable that I had before. And I am taking the contents of that variable above. I'm getting rid of the word end, and I'm trimming any extra line carriages off the end of it, right? So I'm just basically doing cleanup on that variable. Next, there is a port config 2 variable that I am setting, and I'm setting it to not found, right? So I'm just kind of initializing it to a known state of not found. So I have port config 1 and port config 2. The idea being I'm going to compare 1 to 2 at some point. Here I am just setting it to not 2 because right here it's going to get overwritten theoretically. So what I'm doing here is I've got a conditional at the top. Conditionals oftentimes in documentation, you'll see them at the end. I actually like putting them at the top, and it doesn't hurt it to have it at the top because sometimes your task will get really long, and if you have your when at the end, you'll sort of miss it. And if I have it at the top, I'll say, oh, this only runs when this condition is met. And so it just, I don't know, it's for my brain, it kind of logically makes more sense. That was a little tip I got from Jimmy. But here, I am looking in the description of the interface, remember, because that's what we're matching everything on, and I'm looking for the contents of it. So if you remember in this primary one right up here, we had all of our interface descriptions. We populated that variable with all the different interface descriptions we have. And right now, I am just looping through interface description. So one after another, I'm just looping through and I'm checking, hey, does it match here? Does it match here? Does it match here? And you can see that I'm doing search. So it's just looking inside of there, right? Like, does this string match inside of here somewhere? It doesn't have to be precise. It's just, hey, is it in there somewhere? If it is, it will set the variable port config2, right, which is the one we had previously set to not found, to the contents of its template, right? So if it is printer, right, if it searches, loops, loop, and matches printer, it will use the lookup template, or rather the lookup plugin for template, and it will be, the variable name, which would be printer plus.yml. So it's going to look in that template folder for the printer.yml template. It'll grab the contents of that and stick it into the port config2. So we move on down here, and keep in mind, we had to account for if the description isn't set, right? Like it isn't set properly, right? It doesn't show up in the match. And so here my conditional for this task is if it's not found, right? So if it loops through all of those and never finds one that matches, then it's still going to equal not found because we had set that ahead of the previous task. So if it is not found, I am going to call the Ansible role that I brought in with the requirements.yml file, recall. It's called Ansible-reports, what I named it. The role itself, right? So I'm including that role. That means I'm bringing that role in. I'm calling that role now. And I am setting a variable called action type write because I'm writing. They also have in that role the ability to send over, and it says email, and at that point it will just send the email. But for now, it's going to write a line to the CSV, and I am doing write line. Right here is the variable of, hey, this is the line I want to write. And so I'm just populating with whatever the host name is currently. It's going to have the text interface description mismatch, and then it will include the configuration cleaned up, right? Like I'm doing a little trim right there, but it's going to have the show run off the interface. So I'm going to say, hey, this was the show run on that interface. So you can see exactly how this thing is configured. Next, it will hit another task right here, and this conditional is going to get met if one, port config 2, right, like that second configuration that should be built from the template, doesn't equal not found. That means we did match a template, so it's going to be populated. And then I'm also, you can see right here at the beginning part, I am comparing config 1, right, which was the show run off the interface, with the template config. And if they don't match, that means, oh, I need to write a line because the two configurations don't match, right? This doesn't match its proper template. And I'm using the exact same report role, setting it to write, and I'm saying write line. Here I'm putting, again, the host name of the device that I'm operating against. Next, I'm putting the text config mismatch so that I know it did match, but the configurations didn't match. And then last, again, I am attaching the show run interface onto it. And in a nutshell, that's it. After it completes this for all of the hosts, all the switch ports, it's going to then send that report via email. I could override all of those inside the role. I actually have my role set up so that it works with my configuration stuff. If you import that role, you'd obviously have to overwrite the contents of the default section of that role, which is pretty straightforward. All of these files that it's creating, remember it's writing the CSV file and stuff, I'm delegating all of that to localhost. So it's actually going to be writing that directly inside the container, right? Because Ansible Automation Platform 2.x spins up an execution environment, which is really a container. And it's just writing all that information into that container temporarily. And then it will aggregate, create the report, send it, and then ephemerally delete and go away. You could modify that behavior so that it writes these reports to a server that's going to be, persistent, or something that will be persistent. But for me, I don't care about the persistence of it. I just need it to be ephemerally created and then sent, because I'll have a copy of it. Now it could send an email, or you could open a ticket in your ticketing system and shove the report in there. You could save it to a file share somewhere. You could do anything you want with it, right? You could send it to Slack. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's like whatever you want to do with this information, you can aggregate it and use it. The bones should be there. So I'm curious If you were to utilize this environment, rather in your environment, how would you modify this? How would you change this? Does it meet kind of what you're looking for? Let me know. Thanks, and happy automating. We'll catch you next time.